And I do now wish to officially open the seminar by welcoming our Vice-Chancellor to the stage. And I am delighted to introduce Deakin University's Vice-Chancellor, Professor Jane Den Hollander. And Den Hollander is the architect of Deakin's strategic plan Live for the Future, Agenda 2020, an aspiration for Deakin to drive the digital frontier in higher education, harnessing the power, opportunity and reach of new and emerging technologies in all that does and prepares students, graduates for Australia's fast-changing global economy. Professor Den Hollander.
Thank you.
How are you?
Well, thank you very much. I'll begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land here on which we are meeting, the Wurundjeri people, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present. And I also pay respects to any Indigenous people who may be with us in the audience and to the lands from which they come. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's an absolute delight to be here. I believe there's a busload coming from Geelong because, of course, the bridge is the bridge. And, oh, they're here. Oh, well, welcome. And I welcome you from all of the different schools you've come to. I'm Jane Den Hollander, I'm the Vice-Chancellor. I've been in this role for almost 5 years, another month and the 5 years will click over. Miraculously, they've renewed me for another 5 years, so there's some time to go. I'm going to spend a bit of time talking a bit about Deakin, a bit about the students that we think we're about to receive from you, and then where I see the jobs of the future, and I'll end with the thorny, miserable issue of our legislation and what is happening to it, and then hopefully take some questions. But I thought I'd start and say, welcome, fellow practitioners. It's a little known, well, it's a well-known fact, but not everybody does know, is that I'm a biochemist. And when I was in the University of Wales in Cardiff, and in the School of Biology at the time, I was asked by my head of school, the famous Dennis Bellamy, to take on the honours students. And as a consequence of that, I became the careers advisor for the Faculty of Science. And so I know quite a bit about what you do, albeit I did it in the university rather than in a school. And so not to panic, all careers advisors can make it to Vice-Chancellors, but you don't have to go there if you don't want. What you do have, if you do go there, of course, is a very good insight into what people think and what people find important, particularly parents, particularly families, and absolutely students. And if I could just chastise James, wherever he is, about us getting older and students getting younger. I was asked just this week in a radio interview what I loved most about working at a university. And of course, what I love most is also what I hate most. I love the next 5 weeks or 6 weeks when all of our new students come. They are, excited, enthused, delighted, and just all wound up waiting for this great release in your university life, which of course is going to be a breeze after year 12, and it takes 6 weeks for the shock to set in. What I hate most about it is every year they're about 17 to 25, and of course they always stay that age, and it's us that gets slightly older. And you only realise that every now and again, and I met someone just last week who's coming here with his parents, and he was born in 1995. How can that be? But there we are. So welcome to the Burwood campus and to what is a very important day to us. You are very central to what we do. There is a lot of evidence that what careers advisors say and do in their schools with their students is central to how their decision-making goes. They often take those ideas home to family. And so you're getting a very realistic picture of who we are is important so that your students who fit with us can be directed our way. So I thought I'd start a bit with the Burwood campus. Here we are at Burwood. It's a very significant part of the Deakin archipelago, as I like to call it. We have Burwood in the southeast. You can follow the bay round. We're very close to the water always, down to Geelong, to the waterfront, and then just 15 minutes from there to Warm Ponds, and then cruise on down to the coast to Warrnambool, where we have our fourth major campus. Alongside that, we have learning centres dotted everywhere, and you will hear more about that as we go on. What we've done over the last 5 years is to take the digital frontier by the horns and try and wrestle with it so that we don't get left behind. And I think we've done that moderately well. The video you saw of the recruitment team is the kind of thing that we can do at the drop of the hat. We do a lot of things by video with our students. A lot of our courses have changed, and the panel later tests them on what that means. We are not an online university. We're a highly digitalized presence university. So personalization means an awful lot to us. We expect to be face-to-face either at 37 degrees as we are here, or face-to-face through an interface of some description which we can use. So the campus is quite modern. This afternoon I think you're going to be up in our front building, which is an uber representation of the future. Fewer offices than we used to have, many people working in hot environments, a lot of transient people coming and going, using facilities. Great coffee, great food, because there's one thing that particularly Victorians like, and I say that as a Western Australian, is you do have a particular critical view on the quality of the food and the coffee that you imbibe every day. So you'll enjoy that. If you walk down the campus along the spine, you'll come to the Cube. The Cube is part of the representation of who we are and will increasingly become the information point. We're just testing it at the moment to see how the information will work. But it's becoming a symbol of who we are. What is interesting is how many of our students last year started to do videos and do things around the cube, and what does the cube mean? And the cube signifies our position between the personal and the digital. That's where our students are, and that's where we need to be. Going on further, there are many other parts of the campus that have been renewed, and I think you'll see them in your tours this afternoon. But I wanted to spend a bit of a time then. This is a very modern campus. It's a campus where we have what I would call highly educated students. They arrive with very good ATARs or with extremely good experience if they mature. It's quite cool in terms of how they congregate and how they learn. Look at the library and see how our second and third years, although there are numbers of them already on campus, it's not as crowded as it could be, and see how they connect. And so what do we think a modern student needs, coming from you to us? Well, the first thing they asked you, and I was asked this just yesterday. Yesterday I was at the Warm Ponds campus, and a student wandered in, clearly new, and I introduced and said, "Hello, how are you?" And he said, "Oh, no, I'm very fine. Could you just tell me what your Wi-Fi code is? Isn't that great?" And he must have been 18. Well, he was 18. He's coming to do health. And they want Wi-Fi. Students who walk onto the campus, the first thing they need to know, where's the Wi-Fi? Is it free, and can I get access? They can. We have the biggest bandwidth, I think, in the universe, but certainly in Victoria. They want company. What I found is that because we get more and more connected, what we're finding with our students when they get here is they love the library and they like to be in learning groups. They learn in groups in a way I know that I did not. As a scientist, I learnt in my bedroom. I went to lectures and then I went home to my bedroom, and if I went to the library, I sat in silence in a corral with a book, whereas now it's actually the place to be and where all the social life goes on. So Wi-Fi and company, and they like beautiful space. We found that our learning goes better when we make stylish spaces. Now, this is a large lecture theatre. We do set pieces in place like this, absolutely to this day, and students like them. But you can see I'm in front of what appears to be the front of a battleship. It is, and the average academic these days is a technocrat who can do all sorts of things, but also control a large group of people. So spaces are good, and then food. Food seems to matter. Well, it does to 19-year-olds, particularly to 19-year-old boys. And we have spent a lot of money over the last little while fixing our food and our social spaces. Why? Because you can learn anywhere in a digital environment. So if you go into our food places, you will notice that there are plugs everywhere, because if you're going to have Wi-Fi, your phone, your iPad and your computer need to all be plugged in simultaneously, as you know. So we've paid quite a bit of attention to that, because we don't care where people learn, we just want them to learn. How they get their content is a mix of things in our Cloud Deakin and our Deakin Sync. Now, Deakin Sync is an award-winning portal a portal in our language, something much more sophisticated in modern 2015 language. Deakin Sync is where our students go, and it's personalised about them, and I'll say why in a minute. So if I go to Deakin Sync for me, it says, "Hello, Jane," and it has all the things about me. It has my leave and my what I'm doing today, what my email is, and other things that I need to know. As a student, it will have their units. It will enable them to go to that unit if they want. It'll warn them if their assignments are overdue. That's a little scary. So it's that personalised. It'll tell them when their exams are. It will send them a note if they're not turning up for things. So we have personalised that for students. We launched it last year. Our Chief Information Officer, we call him a Chief Digital Officer, won the Education Prize for the most innovative thing done in Australia in 2014. We were very proud of that. It was entirely voluntary, and as of yesterday, just over 51,000 of our students, that means all, 100%, use Deakin Sync. Over 5,500 of our direct entries, those that didn't go through VTAC, actually enrolled and paid their fees and are fully commissioned to go using Deakin Sync. The feedback has been fantastic. We have done that so that students can do the things they need to do where they are and not have to come up and line up somewhere. If they want to come in and meet someone, they can. You know as well as we do that students will do whatever they can from the convenience of where they are as often as they can. I think that's a good thing. It's the beginnings of tolerance, it's the beginning of resilience, and the beginnings of doing things for yourself. So Deakin Sync, very important to us. The other thing that you'll hear about today is Watson. Some of our students will be walking around with T-shirts, "I am powered by Watson." They're working on the Watson team. Now, Watson famously was the computer that which won at Jeopardy and beat the four biggest brains in the world and won. And Watson famously, more famously in an academic environment as we are, was of course the computer that beat Garry Kasparov, the grand chess master. Watson is a cognitive learning machine that learns from the information you give it. It is live in Deakin at the moment. We have customised it to Deakin. It's got its training wheels on. We have our students using it, asking it questions. When Beverly Oliver arrives, she'll be here. Ask her about Watson and some of the things it does. It's a very interesting and powerful tool, 24/7, 365, information for our students wherever they are in the world about Deakin. Does it replace a teacher? Does it replace an advisor? Absolutely not. What it does is take out some of the bottom of the pyramid questions and put them there. Our aim ultimately is to go to Watson the advisor. What is it that you want to know about jobs or whatever it is, and how can we help? And put more of the global information there at the click of a button. Watson is frighteningly fast with the information we've put in it. We're the education partner of IBM. IBM, Fortune 30 company in the US. This is a seriously big deal for us. And in truth, when we announced the partnership last year with IBM, I went to New York to do that. It is the biggest amount of publicity Deakin has ever received in its entire life, in every language. I couldn't understand every language, but Magnifico, Deakin, IBM sounded pretty good to me in Italian, and I could go on into all of the things. It was seen as a big deal, and everybody, every university pretty much it feels, is asking us for information. Your students, when they come next year, will use the second phase of Watson, and I hope it will be useful. And of course, the final thing our students want is flexibility. They want to do things when they want to do them on the device that they're currently using, and it could be anything, and they want it wherever they are in the world. And also, what we like to pride ourselves on, wherever they are academically. If you are a 99.95, a totally independent person who can do everything quite quickly because of intellect, then of course we should allow that to happen. But if you are a mature age woman who is returning and haven't been at university or in any form of education for 5 years, you probably do want some additional support and some tutorial advice on how to write whatever it is that you have to write. And academic writing, as you know, is different from texting to your friends. So we have flexibility, education where you are, and that means geographically and intellectually, and preparedness. Almost everybody who comes here is pretty clever. Time on task is essential. With time on task, you can be whatever you want to be. You might need some help to get the writing and the process right if you are first generation and have no idea what happens in universities. We are reasonably mystical still with some of the terminology because of our act. So flexibility is very important to them. But in terms of flexibility, I'll tell you the one limitation which you could pass on to students and their parents. I got an email from a student the other day who said that she was going overseas, she was going to a wedding, she'd noticed that it clashed with an exam she was doing. So would it be possible for the university to text her exam to her phone? She'd do it in the airport and text it back. And the answer I wrote had 2 syllables in it. It was no, thank you. So she was very annoyed and advised me it would delay her entire life. And we had to take her to the clause in our enrolment form that says you must be available for the entire semester, and this is when it ends, and she was 2 weeks prior. But it's interesting, flexibility for them. Well, why couldn't you just text it? I'm an honest, reasonable person with integrity, and I'll send it back. And probably she would have. So the future for us of how we put assessments into places where the students are with the appropriate barriers will be important. So the modern student is an interesting student, and we think is going to be quite a substantial contributor to the next generation. What else do I want to say? In that context, our students arrived in 2015, and at Deakin we've just been talking, and our theme is what is next after next. We took this big risk in 2010 and moved to being very digital. We took our distance education DNA and skills of knowing how to deal with people who were away from us or in front of us, and we moved it into the cloud. So Cloud Deakin, and upgrading our curriculum ruthlessly so that it wasn't just text on a screen. Anybody who is vaguely intelligent can get any kind of content they need from anywhere in the world. The cleverer you are, the closer you are to big databases, the sooner you can get it. What the modern student needs is critical skills, all of those soft skills you know about, the capacity to argue, the capacity to be respectful, resilient, tolerant, culturally aware, etc., etc. That's what they learn through their curriculum. So doing it in different ways, forcing students to think about how to use the modern world in which we live, the modern world of work, in their classrooms and in their relationships with their assignment work is essential to us. We think we're doing that better than almost everyone. Number 1 for learning satisfaction in Victoria for the 4th successive year, and we're hoping for the 5th successive year quite soon. That's the most important KPI for us. 51,000 students, number 1 for learning satisfaction. We're usually number 1, 2, 3 or 4 in the country. The ones ahead of us are always quite small universities, and we think getting satisfaction against that many students, the 8th largest university in the world, in Australia, is an important outcome for us. But what is the world our students are being educated for? And I want to just spend 5 minutes on that. Of course, the world of the future for our students is an interesting one. The 3 big mega trends that Bill Gates and the like will tell you about. Of course, the first mega trend is robotics, machines. Machines learning, machines starting to intervene and take place, many of the roles that are currently in our community. Can we stop that happening? The answer is probably no. Should we stop it happening? The answer is probably no. Evolution will have its way. Machines have a place. The challenge for us is to educate the next generation to work with those machines, because a machine is an inanimate object until you give it power, and it's a human that gives it power. So who are the people who will control and manage and design those machines to do the things that we want them to do? And what are the jobs between machines, in the spaces between machines, between vacuum cleaners that can come out at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and vacuum when you're not there, from water systems that you can turn on. I have a home in Margaret River. Western Australia is always on fire. We have a system that we can turn on on our mobile phone now if we even think that there's smoke damage on our house there, and all these sprinklers come into play. That's a machine. Now, it's a person coding that machine or coding this that does that. So the big mega trend of machines, how we work with those machines, so there's coding and STEM skills, I'll get to that in a minute, and then the spaces between machines, the personal jobs that will start to come up. So robotics, machines, very, very big trend. You can watch it everywhere in the world. Go anywhere and you will see they are there. It has profound consequences for us. And Prime Minister Modi, the Indian Prime Minister who was here just recently, said that his biggest challenge was to educate the 70 million people in India who were totally unskilled, to prevent them from becoming a stranded generation, unable to work because there would be no jobs for them. Now, we're blessed. We're only 23 million people, but we need to pay attention that our 23 million people are skilled for the jobs of the future. Big trend. The second trend then is big data. Big data is everywhere. Everything we're doing here, if you've logged on to EduRoam, the EduRoam system knows that you're here. Everything we do is now part of data. There are vast amounts of data. I won't give you, they now talk about zettabytes and zettabytes. I have no idea how big a zettabyte is, except it's bigger than that, and we need a lot of money to store it all. All of that data is swirling around the world. If there's one trend we know in the world, that anyone under 30, they just give up their data immediately. There's no such thing as privacy. My children think I'm quite quaint because I won't tell Google what my GPS is. Now, that's just because I'm slightly older and I don't want Google to know where I am all the time. Most people, in fact, 92% of all people actually give that information up because they want the information. Most people will give up almost everything they know about themselves in return for some free Wi-Fi. It's astonishing. But it's a trend and the data exists. So we can do all sorts of things knowing how our students are progressing. Who's not turning up for assignments? We better send them an email. They haven't responded. We better phone. We've talked to them. They didn't turn up for the interview. And you can start to help people progress, whereas 5 years ago, they would have just left the university, or we would not have known what the issue was that we needed to fix. So big data is powerful and useful, and I'm sure you will all be using it in your schools in exactly the same way that we're using it. But the whole world is using data. The third one is personalisation. I want everything to be about me. When I go past anything, I'm interested in how it affects me rather than anyone else. I don't want a mass email to every person who's over 55 and earns a certain income. I'm offended by that. I want the email to be about me and the things that I like. Our students, as you get younger, are more and more and more determined on that than anyone else. So personalisation, how do we make sure that everything we do is about the student? Where is young James? Is about James and not about all the people roughly about James's age who were one of our alumni. We need to focus things on James and his needs. The three big trends flowing across the world will have profound consequences for Australia. We're noticing it already. H&M, one of the big retailers, walking into the middle of Melbourne. They've taken over that beautiful building. They're a British company. They are not Australian. Where is their power? It's the personalisation. Stand outside that building for too long and they'll send you a text and say, come in. We think you're size 12 and we have seen a really nice pink dress you might wear. This is not from H&M, but it could be. I was talking to an American who works for Macy's. He was the CEO of Macy's. And he has an absolute system that looks at people standing outside their windows. And if you pause, and this is to the ladies in the room, and Michael Kors bags is one of their big windows. If you pause and stare at the blue bag just for a minute, you will get a text telling you how much it is and why don't you come in and see what it looks like and have a cup of coffee. Now, whether you like it or not, that's our future. I don't actually mind that because you know what? You can just ignore it. But what it is useful is they might give you some information. So that's the world we live in and the kind of trends. So what does this mean for the curriculum and the education we need to give our students? I need to tell you, it's not about sitting them down in large lecture theatres and giving them Accounting 100, which they could look up on a website somewhere close. It's much more about the skills that they need, particularly the communicative, the multicultural, tolerance, resilience, teamwork, teamwork, and teamwork. So Beverly has built a beautiful set of graduate learning outcomes which we think are fit for purpose for 2020 to 2025. Alongside that, though, ladies and gentlemen, Australia sits 30 out of 31 in the OECD. We have a plummeting trend on people, particularly young girls and women, taking science, technology, education and maths, against a trend in every single modern economy in the world where it's skyrocketing. We have a trend in Australia of no one wishing to learn to code. So if you go onto the website, go and look at We Code It. It's a little website, and it's a group in America who have taken the place by storm, and they've taught women who are at home with children to code so that they can do the coding for apps and for those machines of the future. And they are making absolute profound differences to the lives of women about the jobs of the future. What is the example there? Go back 5 years. If anyone in the room said they knew what an app was 5 years ago and they hadn't been to Silicon Valley, they'd be lying, because no one knew what an app was 5 years ago. Today in Australia, there are thousands and thousands of app developer jobs, extraordinarily well paid, existing right now. The skills for those were taught in a just-in-time kind of way. The one thing they all have in common, they code. Coding is not that boring if you do it well, and you need to think about we, collectively, Australians, educating Australians as the leaders of the future, need to think about why we are not getting our people to learn some of these necessary skills. I think coding will be up there with literacy and numeracy shortly, and we all need to do some of it. I don't think it's going to be easy to how we persuade our culture on that, but it's something we need to do. In Geelong, just this last week, I was talking to a small tech company who's expanded. Now, Geelong is an interesting place. It has unemployment, you would know that. The wheel has turned. There are many people looking for jobs. And he had 10 jobs, I think, roughly, or maybe it was 15, because 5 of them were administrative jobs, and he had huge numbers of applications and filled them. Brilliant people. He has 9 developer jobs, coding jobs. Straightforward, quite interesting coding around interesting things. This is not about building a widget. This is about quite interesting stuff. I won't go into it. He did not get 1 application. He thinks he will have to go to 457 visas. It is great coding. Anyway, needless to say, I've introduced him to third-year IT students, 3 of whom he's taken on part-time because they can code. Their jobs of the future are going to require some knowledge of science, technology, engineering or maths, not at Brain of Britain level, not at Stephen Hawking level. You don't need to know the theory of everything. At a level here which is modest, how do we do that? And how can we help you persuade people to do that? Because for sure, that's what the country needs if we want to be secure and competitive in our region. And surely that's what we all want. So that was about all I was going to say. Now, all of that you can do at Deakin, of course, I would say that. We have some wonderful staff here. Number 1 for learning satisfaction. We're the university that is one of the 15 Australian universities in the top 3% of the 3 main world rankings in the world. There's only 3 universities in this state that can claim that, and of course it's M&M and Deakin, and we're incredibly proud of that in 40 years. Greenfield site in Warn Ponds, 40 years ago. In Hansard, you can read, someone stood up and said, no good will come of this. Well, 51,000 students, a 900 million turnover, number 1 for learning satisfaction, a number 3 in the state for research. We believe we're doing moderately well. We won the Premier's Award as International Educator of the Year, and we won the very, very high prestige Governor's Award for Export Higher Education. Now, to win those awards, we're not the biggest international university. We sit at about 16, 17%. But what we do very well indeed. So I'll end then, briefly, the reforms. I think you might want to know how much are our fees going to be. Well, of course, at this stage, we don't have fees. I will assure you that the Deakin promise remains. We have always been a university for access, for participation, and for education where you are, for the jobs of the future. We will remain with that. We have certainly looked at what our fees projection might be if there is legislation that deregulates the system. For the record, this is the Deakin view. Our view is that the HECS corrosive level to the 10-year bond rate was outrageous. We protested very mightily and very publicly. I was very gratified that the second version of the legislation reduced HECS repayments back to CPI. Now, who would have thought we'd have said that CPI was fair and good? But it's much fairer and much better than the 10-year bond rate, and probably is about right for the private benefit. We object strongly to this day that the public good, that public funding in public universities should be reduced. We are in a war of competition against every other jurisdiction in the world to have a smart nation that can look after itself. Having smart people relies on public funding. Anyone who suggests that the Americans do it all on benefaction needs to go and look at the public accounts of the big universities. This is how much public funding Harvard has. Next comes benefaction, which is about that much, and about that much over here, you can barely see it, is industry funding. Public investment in universities is very, very important. A 20% cut, in our view, was too much. Against that 20% cut, if that cut was reduced to zero, I have been on the record to say we could deal with deregulation of domestic undergraduate fees at Deakin. We manage deregulation of postgraduate fees. We've done that for years, and we do it extraordinarily well. Numbers have grown, students have come, and they've gone on to great jobs. We manage the deregulation of international students, and we peg at about we try and keep it to about 8,000, something like that. We keep it quite small because everyone's on campus. And we've managed that very well. In our view, without the cut, the market might mean that some courses would pay less than they pay now, and a couple of others would pay slightly more, and that we would balance it out. We're a financially sensible university. That's my promise to you. But where is the legislation? Well, it went through, interestingly, the House of Reps last night. Of course, the government has a majority there. It's now in the Senate, and we are now beholden to the crossbenchers to see what they do. The smart money, a lot of people are saying it won't get up. I don't know at this stage whether it will or it won't. I don't think it should get up without the cut being massively reduced, because that is unfair to you as taxpayers, and it's unfair to the students next year and the year after, who will end up with enormous debt in order to manage their finances, and that cannot be good for the country as a whole. The country needs clever people to replace you when you all retire to keep running the place. And if we don't, other people will come. If we keep that cut, it will mean it'll be cheaper to go to a number of countries not too far from here, and you can get a very good education, by the way. So I'm hopeful that sense will break out and that we'll get a proper legislation that we can all work with. But you know, it's all in Canberra, and Canberra sometimes lives in a bubble, and here we are out in the real world. Thank you for listening. I'm happy to take any questions about anything. I hope what I've said is relevant. I'm not talking about courses because there are people here who will help you with all of that, but I can talk about anything you want. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I think we overcomplicate it, if I might say. What I'm interested in is how many people say, oh, I'm really bad at maths. What do they actually mean by I'm bad at maths? And how does that get into our culture? Why is it that young girls always say they're bad at maths? So one of the things that we've done, we've actually partnered with a girls' school to try and look at that and to bring them in. And this is a girls' school next to our big cadet engineering facility, which is a way of teaching engineering and science through design and problem solving. And we've matched that school up. And there's no problem with their maths. In fact, they're very good. Girls are often quite good, and women are quite good at maths because it's procedural. We're quite good at process. We're quite good at moving from one step to another. So it's something to do with our culture where we think that law, accounting, and medicine particularly, why is it everyone in the country who gets more than 95 applies for medicine? Most of them are not going to be good doctors. Good doctors deal with sick people. Not everybody is good at dealing with sick people. So how do we get the culture back to value some of the things around science and technology? And I've not understood why that is. If you look at the United States at the moment, and I've used the United States rather than Korea, Norway, and Singapore, because those cultures are a bit different to us. They're much more directive on their children than we would be. Our children have more freedoms in many ways. The United States looks more like us, and the UK looks more like us. Why is it in the United States that everyone does science and technology, engineering and maths, particularly till they reach high school, so that they're reasonably confident of their ability in those areas? And I've not understood what it is about the system here, other than people saying, oh no, it's too boring, I'm not interested. And we all have an obligation now to look at that. I'm not sure we've done it well enough. From my perspective sometimes, if I think, and I've been involved in a couple of places, I'm a biochemist, so chemistry is interesting to me and biology. What I remember that got me switched on was frogs' eggs. And it was frogs' eggs under a little microscope in a classroom, and I looked down, and the frog egg had obviously been fertilized, and it split into 2 cells. And I thought that was magic, and I did science. And science is where I am today because I'm logical, I'm numerate. I'm not a mathematician, but I can read a balance sheet from 100 paces, and I'm logical. How do we get people enthralled and engaged about the world as we know it, to take some of those skills to do more? But these days, it's not so much about biology. Things like that is more beauty, and you move on. It's about coding. And I do believe we have a bit of an issue of people refusing to learn to code. I've started to get involved with mature age women groups, particularly those, particularly youngish women who had a bad start, got pregnant early, home with 2 babes, in their early 20s still. Teaching them coding is like that. They can do it from their kitchen table, or they can come into a learning centre and do some of them. There are brilliant careers there, and you can do it wherever you are. How do we, and you'll know better than me because you're closer to it than I am, how do we persuade people that some of these things are interesting? Do we have to alter the way we teach the curriculum to make it more hands-on and more chaotic perhaps to get some of those things? But we need to do that. What's happening in the world? Employers are moving back to the United States, and that's where their businesses are now, because places like Australia are expensive, but that's not the real reason. Australia is a very, very, very nice place to live. The reason they're moving back is we don't have the right skilled people in our midst, and we need to think about that. Now, that's not to say you shouldn't do law or public relations. Absolutely do that. But learn some coding before you do that, because you will use coding in your job. Even I can do a bit of coding on my little thing when I need to. I set my mother's Sonus up. My mother's 90, she lives in the UK, and she wanted to have Sonus radio, and I'm here. Well, she lives with my sister who wasn't, so I helped her from here. Now, we can all learn a bit. It's very painful. But what I think people don't know is how important it is. And they don't understand that some of the jobs that are available require this basic thing, and they think it's a hurdle like that, when in fact it's a little molehill that the averagely, reasonably hardworking person can achieve. And we've made it somehow mystical that Stephen Hawking can do maths and no one else can. Well, that's not true. Most people, you would know that, who can get year 10 and year 12 can do these things. I think it's a bit of a crisis, but I think we're not half bad at getting through it. If Victoria could get this, we would rule the country in terms of getting all of the smart people in our state. And we're such a small state, I think it is something to look at. I've had a good go at government. We've got a number of projects that we're looking at that. One of them, Skilling the Bay, where we're absolutely focused on this one thing to see if we can start getting people slightly more technology positive rather than technology negative. We're the highest users of mobile smartphones in the country, in the world. We're the highest users of apps in our region. The next step is just doing a bit of coding to make your app work better. Many people can do that. But you'd know better than me. I'm not an authority on that. What I'm giving to you is an interpretation of what I see and some of the things we need to change. And it seems maths for everyone, but particularly girls, and some of those technology skills around coding for everyone, particularly girls, is important. So Deakin is number 23 in the world for education, which is huge. Our current Minister, Pine, actually said to me just recently he couldn't understand why we were so highly ranked and had the largest school of education in the country and our teachers were so well regarded. I thought that was an interesting comment. Of course you can be big and excellent, was my view. However, humanities, arts and education at the faculty here is our second largest faculty. Interestingly, it's not a small faculty here. We have deliberately grown it. We are very, very strong. We've probably got the best philosophy department, if not in the state, in the country. And that's important to us. I think you can do technology and humanities. Certainly, it's very important. I'm a believer in breadth. Arts and education does very well here in our science, engineering, health disciplines because you can take electives from anywhere and many people will go and take some of those ethics, philosophy, Australian history, Australian studies type electives which give them that massive breadth and teach them to write appropriately. So we are very strong on humanities. We have not, against the trend, cut humanities because we see it as a way of many people getting an education and getting a good one. I'm in favour of the law degree being a basic arts degree, law with arts, law with science, law with commerce. It's a basic arts degree. It teaches you to be critical. It teaches you a bit of multicultural understanding and resilience, and it teaches you to understand and be able to argue with others. From there, where you go, you most probably, for 90% of people, they don't want to be a corporate lawyer in one of the big 10 in Australia. They don't want to work those incredible hours, which is every day of the week, Saturdays and Sundays. But what it does give them is a profoundly good education from which to work almost anywhere. So we push that. It's one of our most popular degrees. It cuts quite high, I have to say, and we've started to think and look at that, what it means. So no, I would not say that what I'm saying about STEM is to the exclusion of humanities. I'm saying that I'm disappointed that many of our humanities students do not have some technical and numerate understanding, and they give it all up too early because they want to do law or English or philosophy. That's a good thing. Actually, cancel the philosophers. A lot of the philosophers are actually very good, often technocrats and people who've done maths who edge to philosophy because of the big questions of the world. So they're a small group, so count them out. But our lawyers, our historians and our teachers should have some of those skills. I have not embraced some of the arguments about teachers in the media of late. Brenda Cherednichenko sat on TMAG, which looked at all of that. Most of our teachers don't come into Deakin with an ATAR, as you'd know. Very, very, very few do. The couple who did have usually had disaster or misadventure in their lives, mothers dying, and as a consequence crashing out in year 12, etc. And we should all be brave enough to keep some of that in place. Most people who come to education have done something first, and that's probably a good thing. I have a son who has a science engineering degree, a Bachelor of Arts in History, and is now a teacher, and he has a very, very high ATAR. Has a high ATAR made him a good teacher? Absolutely not. What's made him a profoundly good teacher is the breadth of his knowledge and his interest in people. And I think we need to think about that more. How we deal with that in the media is completely beyond me, and why teachers are suddenly the focus of so much blame, which has nothing to do with them and has much more to do with government policy and funding, is an argument that we probably can't win.
Thank you very much to the Vice-Chancellor. Thank you.